Hi, I'm Peter Tragos, host of the Lawyer You Know podcast and YouTube channel. The saying goes, everyone hates lawyers until you need one. Well, I'm here when you need one to answer your questions and give you insight that you didn't know you needed. Along with my partners, Pete Sardis, the professor, who has a finance and business background, and George Tragos, my dad, and the consigliere, a criminal defense giant, we can answer any questions you have.
Hi everybody, Pete Sardis for the Lawyer You Know. We are back talking about Sunny Balwani. This week, Elizabeth Holmes takes center stage yet again in Sunny Balwani's trial, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But before we do that, as always, if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you're enjoying this series, please subscribe to our channel. And as always, please leave me questions and comments down below, because that is how I figure out what content is interesting for you. All right. So let's talk about what happened this week. The most interesting thing is that Elizabeth Holmes seems to have taken center stage in Sunny Balwani's trial yet again. And what I mean by that is the representatives for the DeVos family testified this week. And to take a step back to remind you all who we're talking about, Elizabeth DeVos was the former Secretary of Education under President Trump. Her family, who is obviously very wealthy, invested $100 million in Theranos. And as part of that courting process for the DeVos family to come in and buy, the representative testified that Elizabeth Holmes was the one that they spoke to. Elizabeth Holmes was the one that they were on the phone with. Elizabeth Holmes was their initial and primary contact. But when they actually came to Theranos to take a look at the equipment, to look at the lab, to look at Edison, to do all of the what we would call due diligence for the project, they met with the COO of the company, which was Sunny Balwani. And Sunny Balwani was the one that actually took them around the Theranos building and showed them the lab. The representations made by the family's rep in the courtroom was that it was Sunny Balwani who not only showed them around, but had indicated to them that for the 2015 year where they actually were going to make their investment, they expected Theranos to make $1 billion. In fact, Theranos lost $600 million in 2015. So obviously the representation is we got duped. That being said, I think that the defense is going to have a little bit of fun with this family representative, because at the end of the day, you have to understand that when you're investing in venture capital type of investments, these are risky investments. The returns are huge, but so are the risks. So a lot of the cross-examination I'm expecting is going to focus on the fact that you're a professional financial analyst. Your job is to evaluate risk. You recognize there's no guarantees in anything, especially when it comes to investments like these. So how can you just look and say, they promised us $1 billion, we didn't make $1 billion, we lost, the company lost $600 million, we lost our investment. That's the risk involved in investing in these types of ventures. Now, I don't know, we'll see if the DeVos family representative actually has specific documentation or has specific knowledge other than obviously the fluff, which is what I call it, of when people are trying to sell these types of investments. But it sounds like most of that fluff was actually Elizabeth Holmes, and the only part of the process that Sunny Balwani was involved in, at least for the DeVos family, was showing them around the lab, showing them the Edison machine, and touting what it was able to do and the amount of money that could be made in revolutionizing blood testing for the world. So with that, let's switch gears for a second and talk about something that has been in our series here for the last maybe couple of episodes. If you recall, the defense had filed a motion to allow them to cross-examine the former lab director of Theranos. His name is Adam Rosendorf. He's a doctor. Because Dr. Rosendorf, in the 3 companies he worked for after Theranos, was involved in some sort of SEC investigation where a lab was shut down and there was an inquiry into his competence and into his license, specifically about his ability to run a lab. The judge has ruled, Judge Davila has ordered that the defense will not be allowed to talk about those subsequent events, things that happen after Theranos, which means at this point, the testimony of Dr. Rosendorf is going to be limited to, I was the lab director and I'd reported directly to Sunny Balwani, and he was absolutely involved in the day-to-day operations in our labs. He was not merely an observer, which is what the defense's representation, but an active player in the lab making decisions. Now, we'll see how this comes together. I'm sure that at some point the defense is going to move to have the judge reconsider that order, because I can see from a perspective of motive. What is Adam Rosendorf's motive to testify? And it very well may be because he has some serious problems in labs after Theranos. I think it's reasonable for the defense to be able to argue this guy is the expert that we hired. He's the doctor, he's the lab director, and obviously we could not depend on him for appropriate information, since everywhere he's worked for after us had the exact same problems we had. So we shall see if they move to reconsider, but for now, that is out. What am I expecting to happen this week? It is on the docket that apparently some of the patients, the Theranos patients, are going to testify. If you remember in the Elizabeth Holmes trial, there were some patients that testified. If you remember, the woman who had lost a number of pregnancies testified that she almost made the decision to terminate a pregnancy because the Theranos test results led her doctors to believe that the pregnancy was not viable. There was a cancer patient that talked about getting all kinds of skewed results that caused her oncologist to constantly be changing her medications. Those kinds of testimonies are going to come into play again against Sunny Balwani. Now, if you recall, Elizabeth Holmes was found not guilty on a number of counts. Those not guilties were in fact the counts having to do with patients. And the jury made the determination that Elizabeth Holmes had not actually done anything to defraud the patients themselves, which is why that specific jury made the determination that she was not guilty of those counts. The reason we know this is the actual jurors came on national television and talked about it. But we'll see, because the government at this point is going to run that exact same play against Sunny Balwani. It sounds like it's going to happen this coming week. So the question is going to be, will this jury determine that Sunny Balwani had nothing to do with defrauding patients, or will this jury see it differently? Can you have inconsistent verdicts between one defendant and another? Absolutely. Happens all the time. So the government is going to throw everything they possibly can against Sunny Balwani, even though they lost those counts against Elizabeth Holmes. They're going to try their luck on it again this coming week. We'll keep you posted and see how that testimony plays out. But you tell me what you think. Do you think the fact that the testimony at this point has been that Sunny Balwani was in fact in charge, let's try that again, that Sunny Balwani was in charge of day-to-day operations for the lab, do you think that's going to make a difference in how the jury views him compared to how they viewed Elizabeth Holmes, who was obviously in charge of the entire company, but maybe not necessarily having day-to-day responsibilities in the lab work itself? Tell me what you think about that. Let's see how you and my opinions either will converge or diverge as this trial progresses when we get to verdict, to see, do you think that Sunny Balwani will be convicted of counts against the patients, or do you think he'll walk on those just like Elizabeth Holmes did? But with that, thank you very much for joining us today. Again, if you liked the episode, give me a thumbs up. If you've enjoyed this series, please subscribe. And as always, questions and comments below. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.